Welcome back. Let's start writing some tests that are for asynchronous code. If we go back to our script2.test.js, we can start off our first test by saying it calls Swappy, Star Wars API, to get people. And again, same syntax as we've seen before. In our first test, what can we do? Well, we can say Swappy dot get people. We'll give it the fetch API or the fetch function, and then do dot then. And like I said, you could pass down URLs here, and we could do something called mocking, which we'll talk about later. For now, we're just sticking with this method, but let's see what we can test. We have the API that we're calling. Again, it's going to return us a ton of data. So again, we do the dot then, just simple JavaScript. And this dot then is going to return us some data. Remember, it's going to return our data, or it's going to return our count and results. So in here, inside of the dot then block, we can do our assertions. Expect data.count to equal 87. Because remember, if we go back to the website, the count is 87. So hopefully data.count matches 87. Let's see if that's the case. I'm going to save and go back to running our test. Let me clear this and run npm test. And we'll need to press A to run all tests. All right, so that worked. That wasn't too hard. We didn't do anything too crazy. What if we add another test? I'm going to add another test here, and it's going to say it calls Swappy to get people with a promise. Now, this time around, we'll use get people promise. Let's save. All right. Is that actually working? It looks to be working. I mean, we get the tests, 6 of them that have passed. But remember what I said. We always want to make sure that we fail our tests and check that the tests actually are checking what we want to check. One tool that we can use with Jest is something called expect.assertions. And assertions are, remember, assertion library, are these things. These are assertions. So using the expect.assertions, we can say within this if block, we expect 1 assertion. If we had 2, then we should say we expect 2. And this is a good way to test that these things are actually running, especially with asynchronous code. Let me do 1 here. I'm going to save. Whoa, what just happened? Our expect.assertions 1 failed. There were 0 assertion calls. So something's happening here where this test is passing, but this is never being called. And this is a little gotcha with asynchronous tests. You see, when this happens during tests, it's really hard to debug because it's easy to not check that they work properly. The problem is that the tests are actually completing as soon as the get people gets called. And remember, a promise returns a pending state. So this is going to get returned before we actually receive the data. How do we get around this? How can we tell the test, hey, don't just pass this test because nothing happened and we just returned a promise with a pending state. Wait until this is actually done and then keep going. There's a few ways to do this. The first way to do it is to use a single argument called done. So instead of having an empty parameter here for the function, we can have done that gets automatically passed to a test. And this says, hey, just wait until the done callback is called before you actually say this test is finished. And you usually put it right after the expect call. So let's say this is now done. So let me save that. All right, it passed. Now we're saying, hey, don't pass this test until this is done. Just to test, if I change this to 0, this is failing because we have one assertion call. Awesome. Now, this is one way of doing it. And the neat thing with this is that if for some reason if this fetch call fails, let's say that in the script2.js, this is actually an incorrect URL parameter that we're sending. Maybe we misspelled people. If I save this, you see that I get an error, calls SOAP to get people, and I get an error here, so that the test waits until I'm actually done. Very nice. Now let's fix this, bring this back to 1, and talk about the other way that you can do this. And this is really easy. If your code uses promises like we have, there's a simpler way that's probably less confusing for most people to handle asynchronous tests. And this is another thing that I really like about Jest. We can simply, instead of doing this, just return the promise. And Jest is smart enough to say, oh, because we're returning this, I'm going to wait until this promise returns. And if the promise is rejected, the test will automatically fail, which is very nice. Again, let's save this. Everything's passing. If I misspell the API URL again, you see that the test automatically gets failed. Now, this is a little tricky. You have to always make sure that you return the promise. If you omit this return statement, as we saw, your test will complete before the promise actually gets resolved or rejected. So here's a tip. When running asynchronous tests, always do this. Always do the expect assertions. Always test out that your assertions are being tested. So let's finish this off. Let's add a few more lines. We'll say that in here, we're going to add 2 assertions. And again, we want to return here. And we'll add another assertion that says that we expect data dot results to have a length and what can we use here? We want to check maybe that the results, we get at least 5 people, or that the length is greater than, let's say, 5. Luckily for us, there's a Jest cheat sheet. And this Jest cheat sheet, wow, try to say that fast 5 times. That's pretty hard. Actually has all these things that you can use for the tests right in here. Super, super useful. These are pretty much all you need to write the perfect tests. And we see here that we have the to be greater than method. So let's use that. I'm going to say to be greater than. And again, this is why I love Jest and most assertion libraries. They just make everything read nicely in English, so you understand exactly what's going on. So I'm going to say to be greater than 5. Let's save. All right, we get a few errors. So let's fix this test. 2 assertions to be called, but we only got 1. Why is that? And I get an error, length of undefined. And let's log out data to see what we're getting here. So let's do console.log data.results. And I'm getting undefined. So it looks like over here, oh, there you go. I've noticed my error. I misspelled results here. You're probably laughing at me right now, but this happens a lot more than you think. All right, so let's see that. All right, that's good. We're getting some response. Let's remove the console log. Hit save. And again, this is another good reason to write tests, right? Because I wouldn't have caught that mistake until I've actually run the app. So I see here that I just have a simple type error to be greater than, again, terrible at English. This is THAN. All right, everything is passing. And what you just witnessed is how tests usually work. They're constantly breaking, and you try to get to this green state. And when you get to this green state, it's like, hallelujah, this is so nice. It feels so good to have everything green. And things are working. Awesome. All right, I think that's good for now. In the next video, I want to talk to you a little bit about mocking. I'll see you in that one. Bye-bye.